All right, it's 3 o'clock. Great to have you in all. Welcome to this webinar, an introduction to data virtualization and modern data management. Last week we had some technical problems, and still we are struggling with the webinar Jam platform. But I'm glad you guys are all in. Today I will be co-presenting with Gary Baverstock, Director Northern Europe of Denodo. I see he has also some connection problems, but I'm sure he will join in. Okay, why this webinar? Data virtualization and modern data management. As you have noticed, Kadenza has gone onto a partnership with Denodo. Denodo delivers a data virtualization platform, and we think it's the right solution for enabling the logical data warehouse. So more on the partnership later on. What can you expect? Data virtualization and modern data management. To state clear, it's about data virtualization, so no desktop virtualization or something to do with server virtualization. It is about to make virtual the data from your sources and delivering it in the reports to your users. It's not. It's a new concept in Holland. There's not much done with it. So we think now is time to enable data virtualization because the tools and the platforms are really well at the moment. So we will be in the call. Me, Jonathan, I'm an architect at Kadenza, and Gary is Director of Northern Europe, Denodo, and we will both do this webinar, and Gary will take over in a minute. All right, the agenda for today. First, let's have a look at the Kadenza Smart Data Vision and how data virtualization will fit in here. Again, with the logical data warehouse concept, as you maybe have noticed my blog on it. The logical data warehouse is a concept, but with the Denodo technology and the platform, you will really be able to effectively create a logical data warehouse. And we're going to see how the Denodo architecture can help with that. A focus on partnership of Denodo and Kadenza. What can you expect from it? General introduction to data virtualization. And Gary will head on with the Denodo architecture and all the logical layers which are in there to create your data virtualization solution. After that, we will have a look at some use cases where the Denodo really fits in with data virtualization solution. And at the end, we have, of course, room for question and answers. And we come to a conclusion and see what data virtualization can how data virtualization can be useful in your kind of business, or what next steps you can take. Okay, Kadenza. I think most of the audience is Dutch, so I all think you know Kadenza. Just a short slide on this. It's the most progressive and autodidactic smart data company in the Benelux. We are with 75 experienced consultants, and we try to place data in the heart of the organization. And questions we daily receive is what kind of impact does big data have for me? How do we analyze? How do we visualize our data in a flexible manner? and what are your best practices with that. So with Denodo and data virtualization, we really think we have the right answer on that. So we see the changing world, big data, data is more ease of use. And you see it when we experience the Google speed or the snappiness of your smartphone. Data is right and here, but we also see the current architectures, the struggle with delivering that flexibility and that kind of reaction speed. So in answer to that, it's good to have a look at data virtualization. A Dutch slide, but I think most of the audience is Dutch. What Kadenza is trying to do is data should be leading in your company. It should be the engine of your business decisions. And again, with data virtualization, we really think you can place data in the heart of your organization and be very flexible in delivering the data to the users in the right time and the right form. Okay, Kadenza, we are a value-added reseller with IBM Netezza, the pure data appliance, DataStage, and also with Tableau. And now, why this webinar is here with Denodo, we are reseller and we have the expertise with us to implement those technology. Also, we are consulting partner of Oracle, Microsoft, and SAP. All right, the partnership. So why does Kadenza partner with Denodo, and why does Denodo partner with Kadenza? Well, Kadenza announced its strategic partnership with Denodo, and Denodo is the leader in data virtualization software. Gary will introduce you on that. And the Denodo platform is the core solution which we offer for creating the logical data warehouse. And the logical data warehouse is about flexibility and decoupling your data source from your reporting. We have focus on that concept architecture later on. So what can you expect from the partnership? Kadenza can help you with enabling data virtualization, and Denodo has a really good experience with a lot of places in the world, with lots of use cases. We're going to have a look at that with really enabling data virtualization at an enterprise-wide scale. And that's why Kadenza thinks Denodo is the right partner for enabling data virtualization. So why data virtualization? It ain't broke, so why fix it? It's a true question, but also we see users are experiencing restrictions at the moment. For instance, end users experience little flexibility. They want to have self-service BI. They want to have the data in real time. But again, flexibility is, there's no flexibility for end users. They have that architecture, they have to ask, something has to be built. It takes a lot of time. Also, not in all cases, but mostly specifications are spread across the environment. There's logic in how the sources are extracted. There's logic in how the history is maintained, and there is logic in how the data marts are created. So you have a really spread of logic and business rules across your environment, which can be really pain in the ass when you have changes or want to react fast to changing source systems or connecting new ones. Well, this one, I think everyone notice coupling of different sources. In today's world, data is coming from a lot of places. It's not only within the organization, but also cloud and web-based source systems. We want to connect to the data warehouse, but it's difficult because the data is created outside the company or is in the cloud, and we have a data warehouse on premise, and we have to bring it to the data warehouse. So there's a lot of connectivity issues, replicating the data. It's a struggle, and it's growing every day because we see data volumes go up, and the place where data is created varies very much nowadays. And at last, we see with the data warehouse an ancient architecture. It can be slow, it feels rigid, and there's a big impact when there are changes. For a while, the data warehouse was the right architecture, and still the data warehouse is the right architecture. But it's not the only solution to answer all your needs. So that's what we will want to see about data virtualization. Where does it fit against the data warehouse? Oh, and at last, the high development and maintenance cost. Here you talk about the total cost of ownership, because you are replicating a lot of data, because you have a lot of objects in your data warehouse. Changes are costly to effectuate, and impact mostly is complex, and you need time for this. So why choose for data virtualization? Well, research done on that, and ask people and businesses why go for data virtualization. Well, at first, simplicity, to have one platform which enables you to connect your sources, implement the logic, and deliver it at an enterprise-wide scale to your end users and applications. So simplicity is the main one for here, but also agility and integration, because the data virtualization platform really delivers those two. Well, when we have a look at logical data warehouse, the logical data warehouse for the logical data warehouse, we think this is the solution to many problems. It's a flexible architecture that allows you to easily combine new data sources with your data warehouse. So also your data warehouse can still be a source in your logical data warehouse to the data marts. It's all about decoupling your reporting and analysis from the data sources. So you want to decouple at two places. At first, in how your data is connected from the sources, and on the other hand, how your logic is delivered to the applications and the end users. And within this logical data warehouse, we think data virtualization with Denodo is a good fit to really create the logical data warehouse. So what's important about logical data warehouse? It looks and behaves like a single but virtual data repository. So there's no replicating or loading any data. And for the end users, it appears as if it were in one place. So the data virtualization layer holds virtual views that define a virtual data model. This data model is consumed by client applications from the centralized data virtualization layer. The data consumers do not need to know where the data is coming from or how it's stored. And again, this frees the architect to combine several data sources, extend the data warehouse with external systems and capabilities to the data processing infrastructure. And that's also a thing Gary will mention in the use cases with data virtualization with Denodo. When we have a high overview on the architecture of data virtualization, you will see in the bottom the sources. For instance, this can be Excel, a cloud application. It can be a web service, or maybe your existing data warehouse or your appliance. All sources, and they are all the same for the data virtualization platform, because they are translated to virtual tables In Denodo, this is called the base views, which are representation of the data you need from your source systems. And again, like that warehousing, logic is implemented and is transformed to a data mart. But in this whole process, only logic is added and there's no replication. So in this architecture, you can speak of extract and transforming without the L of loading. So it's ET and there's no replication in it. So you see a layered model, and what layers lies within Denodo, we going to have a look at that. Okay, to state it clear, data warehousing versus data virtualization. Data warehouse is all about physical, is a physical central data collection, where the data virtualization is the virtual central data collection. So it's in key. This is very important because it's virtual. You don't have the data. You don't have the need to move the data around. Again, within data warehousing, structured data, it's all about the structure in your architecture, and in data virtualization you have more freedom with it to combine structured and unstructured. In the data warehouse, the loading is batch oriented, and in the data virtualization you have not only real time, but you have the ability to mix batch with real time. This is an important one, history in data warehouse, because when we are talking about data virtualization, many times history comes in because there's no replicating or loading of data. There's also no history in data virtualization. But still, you can combine a data warehouse on parts of sources where you need history and combine the history within the data virtualization. But for itself, data virtualization does not keep history because it's not replicating and loading data. And here it is, data warehouse is all about replicating from your stage to your ODS and to your data marts. And in data virtualization, there's no replication done. And the data warehouse sometimes can feel rigid because of all the impacts. And in data virtualization, we have a more flexible way of doing things. When we try to define data warehouse, the data warehouse and data virtualization, you can say the data warehouse is an integrated, static, and historical collection of data used to support the business. So integrated, static, and historical, all is done to keep it in one architecture which is uniform and combines all data in the same format and pushes it in the same architecture. Where data virtualization more is an application to make it accessible and to transform data without the need of any technical knowledge about physical storage. So this is an important one. It's about bringing the data, but not keeping or getting the data to the system. Some misconceptions on data virtualization, and after this slide I will hand over to Gary to have a more in-depth side of Denodo. Well, data virtualization, it's a replacement for the traditional data warehouse. As I said before, it isn't, because the data warehouse still can have its key role in many solutions, but data virtualization can work together with the data warehouse, so you can create the logical data warehouse and have a hybrid solution with and virtualization and data warehouse. Another misconception, it doesn't affect any performance of the source system. It's not true, because when you need the data, you still need to get it from the source systems. So in a way, it will affect the performance of your source systems, but we will see in a data virtualization platform like Denodo, there are a lot of things that can be done to do this in a smart way. It's simple to implement than a data warehouse. Not true. Still you need to know your sources, still you need your business demand, and still you need to implement your logic. So it's not simpler, maybe it's flexibler, but it's not simpler. And it requires less conceptual and practical knowledge of program and data modeling. Also not true. You still need to have a good design and a good knowledge of what you want to deliver. Okay, Gary, I'd like to hand it over to you from here.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. And as you will have seen, Jonathan has spent a good amount of time providing definitions of data virtualization. So in this next section, I will not focus on definitions of what data virtualization is, but I will look at it from the perspective of our customers, what kind of problems they're facing, what kind of use cases they have for this type of technology. I will then talk about the architecture itself and how it works, and take you through the typical process for establishing a data virtualization environment, and then finish up with a couple of specific use cases just as examples of the many customers we have around the world. So Jonathan, if you can switch to the next slide, thank you. So just a very quick piece on Denodo as a company to get that out of the way, as it were, and we're delighted to be working with Kadenza in the Netherlands, the smart data company, adding great value to our operations in the Netherlands, and we're delighted that they can help us to deliver good value to customers within the Netherlands region and beyond. So Denodo as a company, it's very straightforward to understand what we do. We only do data virtualization. Unlike a lot of software companies, you wonder what they do with multiple products. Our singular focus is data virtualization, and it has been since our inception around about 16 years ago. So for those of you who think this is brand new technology, actually it's very well established, very mature. We have obviously therefore loads and loads of research and development going into our product. And our singular focus has always been what you now understand through the definitions to be data virtualization. The naming conventions have changed along the way. For things like data federation, enterprise information integration, these are subsets of what is now data virtualization, but the same vision holds true. So Denodo operates globally. We have 4 offices in North America. We have 3 here in Europe. We'll support not just Northern Europe from our London office and with our local partner Kadenza, but also the rest of Europe through the offices in Spain. The product is actually developed and engineered in northwest Spain. And we also have distribution and reseller partners around the world, so we can act very globally and support customers on a 24/7 global basis where they need it. We're a private software company, so we don't publish our results, but we're very strongly profitable and cash positive worldwide. And in line with this market, which is growing very strongly, then likewise Denodo is growing strongly. And we receive significant analyst and press vertical and market journalist awards for the excellence of our product in data virtualization. We consider ourselves the founding father of this type of technology, and our single ambition is to continue to be that leading player and to enjoy the success of the market as customers now adopt it widely and get value from their investment in this type of technology. Thanks, Jonathan. So just to talk about what data virtualization does from a customer perspective, and here we present the contrast. So what the business wants today in the modern world of data is this logical view of the world. They want to see things like customers and products and orders and branches. They want these business-oriented logical views on data. They ideally want that pre-integrated in some way. They certainly don't want to do huge amounts of data preparation to get the data they need. They also want it in different ways. They may want static reports, but they may also want to interact with it from a mobile perspective. Everybody has a smartphone this year and has the world at their fingertips. They may want to do some kind of discovery of the data, some kind of self-service BI. And you have different communities like data scientists and perhaps senior management who passively want to receive static reports, and maybe middle management who may want to interact with the data and do some kind of self-service and discover trends. So lots of different types of users. But overall, all of them want fast access to data, very often in real time. And of course, they want that data to be trustworthy and accurate. And as I mentioned, they want it in a nice, simple way, and maybe through multiple devices. So this is the modern world, and you know, it's very easy for customers to switch now. Everybody's key advantage is the data that they hold. Huge amounts of data with the advent of big data and other technologies being made available and available to process. So this world is rapidly changing, and people demand and are very thirsty for data all of the time to differentiate themselves from their competitors. Thanks, Jonathan. So that's the world of the business and what the business wants from data. But actually, if you contrast that with what exists in most organizations from a technical perspective, that's not the reality. So the reality is a very complicated spaghetti diagram architecture. This is a very simplified one with multiple heterogeneous systems, a lot of complexity, systems that are not connected from a data perspective. And it's very difficult to serve this thirst for data because the architecture itself is not agile, it's slow and it's expensive to change, relies on a lot of replication or point-to-point integration. And it can be very difficult to provision this data quickly in real time. In fact, almost impossible. It's very difficult to deal with this exploding thirst for data volume. It's very difficult to provide access to big data sources in a unified way, to access information that may be in the cloud, maybe on the web. Very difficult to deal with less structured information sources, which are highly valuable today, customer sentiment and social media and so on. And it's very, very complex and difficult to manage, very costly to change, and it really contrasts very strongly with the need that the business has. Thanks, Jonathan. So we call this the information gap, and the aim of data virtualization is to bridge this gap between the business-oriented view of the world that the consumers quite rightly want and the technical complexity, the heterogeneous complex IT landscape that exists underneath. And data virtualization is a platform that sits between that business world and the complex sources underneath, and provides an abstraction layer and gives you the ability to create a more business-oriented or model-oriented view of the world that can then map onto the heterogeneous and changing IT landscape that exists underneath. It's a much lighter approach. It's much more easy and quick to build and change. Although, as Jonathan rightly says, you still have to get that right, and it's not a magic wand. You need to understand your sources. You need to make good decisions. And you need to design the process very well. So it's an environment you need to get right, but it provides for a much lighter touch in terms of data integration and the way that you implement it and control it. But it still gives you very high performance. It gives you the ability to manage security and governance and provide these enterprise class features that you need for data. But doing it in a very much simplified way, and giving you the ability to access data in many different ways, not just static reports, but able to query and search and browse for data and do things much more in real time. But actually in a hybrid fashion, as I will explain as we go through the architecture a bit later on. Fundamentally, you can deliver value more quickly with a big reduction in replication, and it can be much quicker and easier to build your data integration models moving forward. Thanks, Jonathan. Sorry, Jonathan, if you can move to the next slide. Thanks. So at this point, I'll take you through the architecture, and rather than do, thanks, Jonathan, we may as well just build the whole slide rather than wait for my detailed instructions. So now I'll talk you through the architecture of the platform and how it works. And you see Denodo again as this red layer, this software layer that typically exists on a server within your environment or a number of servers, and is between the sources of data and the consumers of data. And from a source perspective, we can really talk to pretty much any type of source you can think of. So obviously existing databases and data warehouses, which can be a very valuable source for data virtualization, as Jonathan mentioned. So structured data sitting within those types of applications, existing enterprise applications, such as SAP BW or other types of enterprise application. Applications that can be sitting in the cloud, software as a service style applications. Hierarchical data, multi-dimensional data sitting in Excel or in flat files or log files, all types and flavors of big data and NoSQL sources, which are very proliferated now, anything that exists in the web, and even customer sentiment or emails or documents. So Denodo can look at all these sources and can point to them and can provide a level of abstraction to begin the process of data virtualization. So And at the top end, at the other end of this diagram, then you see the multiple consumers. So we're really talking about a world with any type of data in the bottom and any type of consumer at the top. So that can be any range of multiple BI tools, portals, can be web applications, mobile devices, and it can be existing applications and SOA infrastructures as well. So the process that you go through to build this logical layer is first of all to point to these existing sources of data using a series of connectors that Denodo ships with the platform, and basically introspect the data source and create something you can't quite see here in terms of the graphic, but what we call a base view. So this base view is a one-for-one relationship with the underlying data source, but very importantly, it's not the data itself, it's actually metadata, so it's just metadata. So it's essentially a table representing what's inside a data source, and you do that by this process of introspection using the connectors that Denodo provides. So at this point, you choose the items that you're interested in, and you create this base view, and it's now essentially a relational table that's representing what's inside a data source, whether that source is relational or even non-relational, and as I've mentioned, could be hierarchical or multidimensional. As far as the data visualization layer is concerned, everything now looks relational, but we've done that without forcing any transformation on the underlying data source. So at that point, you've started the building process to create your logical layer. So for most customers, they do that in a bottom-up kind of way. You could also build this logical layer, this canonical layer, by importing a model, for example, from an Irwin or a modeling tool if you've already invested in building a model. And that model could form the contract between the consumers of data and the layer here. For most customers, they do it in this bottom-up kind of way. And essentially, you're just using building blocks. So once these base views are in place, everything now looks relational, and you can basically graphically build your building blocks and your models. For example, a single view of a customer by using unions and joins and projections. And with that comes a whole raft of transformation and cleansing capabilities, everything in ANSI SQL and a lot more to enable you to normalize the data as you would need to build this logical layer. So at that point, you've obviously bought quite a normalized model. You have these entities like customers and products, as I've mentioned. This normalized world has now been completed. But what most of the time happens is people will then want to build specific views. So whereas before you may have created a physical data mart for a particular business area, you can now have a virtual mart that does that instead for you. Or you may have a particular line of business view on data that you want to feed to an application. Again, you can reuse these building blocks and make that available to a consuming application. So all very graphical, all built within this one simple layer. And that's the simple task of connect and combine. The last step in the process is to publish, and you can publish or consume this layer as if you would any other database. So at this point, you now see Denodo just as a virtual database that has all the rules embedded that enable you to query it as if it's a single database, even though we're most of the time leaving the data at source. And so you can consume Denodo, as I mentioned, as if it's a relational database from your favorite BI tool, or even multiple BI tools. And so you can do that using JDBC, ODBC, or even ADO.NET for applications. And you can just see Denodo as a database, and you can find the information you need. You can send SQL queries, and Denodo does the job of being able to manage that for you. So you can also publish any of the views that exist within Denodo as either SOAP or RESTful web services, and the SOAP obviously for SOA infrastructures and ESB style situations. The REST web services are very powerful. They, of course, can be accessed as XML and JSON, in particular for mobile devices, but also as human readable formats. And so a lot of customers are creating these reusable RESTful web services that mean through a browser, users can now search for the data they need. They can browse using this RESTful web service paradigm. And that's an extremely powerful new way of accessing data and being able to browse and shop around for the data you need. So in the way that works then is from a BI perspective, the most common method is that you would query Denodo. Denodo would receive the query. The consuming BI tool no longer needs to worry about where the data is, what structure and format that data may be held in. The fact it may be in different sources. Denodo will decompose that query into its subcomponents. It will make the appropriate API calls to the underlying sources. It will bring that data together and serve the answer up to the consuming application, in this case a query tool. So this is the sort of pure virtual world of data virtualization, and that exists very well, and we have hundreds of customers doing that very successfully. But as you'll see in a moment, there are also other strategies for dealing with things like performance, which can sometimes be a concern, and it's usually the first question that people ask at this point. But these you can either consume the Denodo layer, as I've mentioned, or publish these web services and link them in with your existing paradigms. Now, or quite rightly, because this is data and often very large volumes and an enterprise class, then you need a lot of features to make that happen in the real world and to meet multiple use cases. And so we have obviously deliberately from the start made this an enterprise class tool. And we can, for example, support your development lifecycle very well out of the box. So we have the ability to interface with version control systems, to check in and check out models as they're being developed, to promote between different environments, the ability to fit in with development and continuous integration lifecycles. We also are able to extend what you can do with the platform, so you can also implement complex procedural logic and custom functions and stored procedures and security, custom policies for security using the development SDK that comes with the product. In terms of the governance style features, then anything that happens within the layer can be monitored and is auditable. So you can use the monitoring capabilities within Denodo to see who has queried what, who has done what within the layer, how long queries have taken. You can look for bottlenecks, you can tune performance using that monitoring capability. Or you can also use your external monitoring capabilities, as everything is published as a JMX event as well. From a governance perspective, you can, once you've built these models, look to see the lineage of data. So you may build, for example, a single view of customer data. You can see a field within that view, and you can trace it back to its original source to see the provenance of that data. And you can also go the other way up. So you can look at the source refresh capabilities we have, which are both manual and automated. And you can, for example, see the effect of a column change within an underlying data source, look at the views that impacts upon, and choose to propagate those changes or not, depending on what's the right answer in your organization. Security is obviously very important as well, and you can work with your existing directory services capabilities. We have connectors for those, so we can bring in those and import those roles. You can use pass-through credentials. You can do, as I mentioned, custom policies, and you can also write down to column and row level with data masking in particular views, lock down who sees what based on their role. And so we've been involved in some very complex security scenarios, which we've been able to manage very well within Denodo. And sometimes the use case for Denodo itself, even ignoring things like Agile Business Intelligence, is the ability to secure and govern access to heterogeneous data in one place. And there have been many customers who've done that just for that reason. So moving over to the other side of this chart, then this is more focused on the performance optimization aspects of data virtualization. As I mentioned, most customers have an initial fear that, will this impact on my sources? As Jonathan mentioned, will this, create a nightmare for us? Actually, no, and there are many strategies for dealing with that. We do have multiple customers accessing data from sources in real time using Denodo because we're very heavily optimized. We can do, there's a whole raft of capabilities there: query delegation and rewriting, join optimization and rewriting again, the ability to do data movement using cost and source constraint based information for optimization, parallelization, throttling, and also horizontal and vertical scalability, which we do very well. So there's a whole raft of optimization techniques that are built into Denodo, and we're just accessing the information we need just when you need it, rather than large-scale data movement. For situations where you do have concerns about particular sources, you may not want to touch them at certain times of the day, or perhaps never. You may be involving external information, perhaps web-based information in your queries. For many reasons, you may want to consider caching, and caching is, we believe, important to a data virtualization strategy and to a successful one. And we have the ability to cache data in an external relational store, and Denodo provides the management capability to make that successful. And that can be full caching and can also be partial caching. And there are lots of lots of very important granular strategies for making caching successful, and you can cache at any level within these views, these tree views as we call them here, and make that successful. We can also schedule what we do with Denodo, so we can schedule the population of a cache, we can schedule the collection of data, we can schedule the materialization of data, because we are not just read, we can also write in certain situations as well. And so scheduling and caching and this pure virtual world give you this hybrid approach to managing lots and lots of different types of use cases and getting a very good return on your investment in data virtualization. Thanks, Jonathan. So what do customers use data virtualization for? Certainly there are hundreds of different types of use cases and more coming along all the time. We're tending to group them in this way so far. So agile business intelligence is certainly a very common starting point, the ability to do more reporting, more real time, the idea of the logical data warehouse, data lake, that Jonathan's touched on a lot today. Certainly the idea of not proliferating data stores and having all these staging areas for data, which make it very difficult for dealing with change and changes in requirements and new sources, by having virtual data marts. Sometimes a virtual data warehouse, although most of our customers still have physical ones as well. Certainly you can be more prototyping based, so you can start to interact with data within sometimes hours. Within data virtualization, you can do less analysis or much more interactive analysis, and the development process becomes less waterfall based and much more iterative and agile by being able to interact with the data very quickly. And again, reducing replication by having virtual stores of data rather than physical ones. You can extend the reach of BI and information management, so we can go out to the cloud and software as a service applications. We go to websites that don't necessarily have a meaningful API and that you don't own or control. And you can extract web data, so you can understand what your competitors may be doing. You can get the latest market information. You can look at social media. You can look at customer sentiment and so on and so on. So you can extend the reach of what is traditionally seen as your data and make a real competitive advantage. For most organizations, there's a problem with having a single view of information and a single source of the truth. So any entity that is spread across multiple systems can be made unified through data virtualization. And this has been used in many, many different operational scenarios. One of the case studies will touch on this. The idea of being able to have a single place where you can see customer data can be extremely powerful, to make that data perhaps available for customers themselves or to help make it available for the call center. But again, any entity which is spread across multiple systems, including pragmatic MDM style projects, could be made unified with Denodo. And then there's the strategic idea of data services in general. So one of the huge benefits of data virtualization is this abstraction layer itself. So the ability to provide a buffer between the sources and the consumers, as Jonathan has touched on again. The ability to build these data services gives you agility in terms of your business, not just for delivering specific individual projects, but maybe for major programs. So we have customers who are migrating and modernizing their estates and are able to protect the consumers as they go through that complex series of changes. Organizations that have merged or acquired and are very quickly able to get a unified view of their new organization as it exists while they make decisions about the longer term and what they may do with that application portfolio. But in the short term, they're able to deliver data very quickly. And they're able to modernize and migrate and protect the consumers of data from the inevitable changes that come along all the time. Thanks, Jonathan. So I'll close with a couple of case studies from the many successful implementations Denodo has throughout the world. The first one I'll start with is Autodesk, which I'm sure a number of you will recognize as a very successful software business, particularly famous for its CAD software, its computer-aided design software, but it's one of a range of creative software applications that it sells in the market. They basically were considering the changing patterns in their customers and the way they like to consume software, and they decided to transform their revenue model from a conventional perpetual licensing approach to a more modern subscription-based approach to increase their profits, obviously, and propel growth, but also satisfy their customers' demands. However, the existing BI systems couldn't support this critical change to the revenue model easily. The transition was impacting the finance department's ability in particular to track subscriptions, renewals and payments. And the BI system that included an operational data warehouse couldn't meet the demands of the business stakeholders who really required both high quality and timely data. So they quickly decided that they needed to evolve to an agile, in their case, BI 2.0 architecture, and make a logical data warehouse at the core of the new strategy. And specifically in this case, it would mean moving from their existing physical model to a much more logical approach to data integration. And they made this decision to go for a logical data warehouse, and in their case selected the Denodo platform to address that change. So originally their data at Autodesk originated from multiple disparate data sources that included OLTP, flat files, geospatial data, streaming data from social media and web logs, amongst many other things. And their traditional integration systems included ETL, as you would expect for batch processing of data from relational databases, and also Kafka for integrating streaming data. They also had an enterprise data lake, which was housing data from several big data sources such as Spark and Scala. And then the OLTP and geospatial data was ETL'd in their case and stored in an operational data warehouse. However, they were finding this infrastructure to be very slow and inefficient. It wasn't really able to meet the demands for agility and new information required to make this transition to the new business model. So they introduced Denodo's data virtualization platform initially to the finance department, who used it to track subscriptions, renewals and payments. It helped to abstract the financial data from the business users without them having to touch or transform any of the physical data or underlying systems. And also they realized that they needed to protect all of the sensitive data belonging to the enterprise. So there were lots of governance, risk and compliance initiatives that obviously were designed to help them better manage the handling of sensitive data and mitigate risk. And obviously they're also needing to deal with Sarbanes-Oxley compliance controls for lots of other internal initiatives as well. So the Denodo platform helps them to manage these complexities and lots of other compliance initiatives that map to the privacy laws that you have to deal with. So using Denodo as a logical data warehouse, Autodesk has created a single unified enterprise access point to any of the data used within the company. In terms of benefits, they've successfully transformed their revenue model using the data virtualization, Denodo data virtualization platform. They've improved business performance across the organization, bolstered collaboration by sharing much more timely information across the business and IT worlds. They've modernized their business at all levels to ensure a much greater agility, performance and profitability. And in addition, it's also enabled them to allow their external partners to directly connect to Autodesk's SAP ECC application using web services, and that allowed them to process payments in close to real time. So fundamentally, they don't need to move data anymore. They can use a lot less ETL. And the first time they're able to perform single point of enforcement for security across these multiple sources and have a uniform environment for data access. At the development level, it also helped the development team to sort of give them the flexibility to understand what they needed to build before they actually built it. It enabled them to plan ahead and see what their business teams needed from software products before they began development. So overall, it's provided great agility and made data virtualization a very attractive investment to the company. Thanks, Jonathan. So the second case study is about Jazztel, which is a major telecommunications provider in Spain that owned its own infrastructure and provided broadband solutions for voice data and internet in both residential and business markets. And they were very well recognized for having the best infrastructure offering in the market and also the only operator at that time with their own call center. But the big challenge was to differentiate themselves in terms of providing a high level of customer service. They were finding it easy to attract new customers because of the infrastructure investment they'd made, but actually were losing customers just as quickly. So their contact center had a CTI solution, and it basically required the customer service agents to use lots of different systems, including CRM, incident management systems, network management systems, and diagnostics, and so on. But made it very complex for them to complete customer service tasks. So customer service was not good. It was quite low standard compared to their competitors. It took them a long time to complete calls. And there was a general dissatisfaction with the level of customer service they were able to provide. certainly a lot of what you would call swivel chair integration, because the call center agents had to access a large number of applications to solve customer issues and find the information they needed. And they also had to deal with a lot of requests. Similarly, they were often rekeying information from one system to another to progress the request and solve the problem. So they basically decided that they needed a single view of all customer information. They wanted it presented in a single application that the call center agents could use. And they decided, in this case, a much more operational use case, obviously, to use the Denodo platform to access all of the data that they needed and publish it to the call center application. This then enabled all of the agents to see all of the relevant information that they needed to resolve a customer issue. In this case, linked in with CTI, so that when a call came in, it recognized the customer, fired off the queries, and presented the information in one place to call center agents. So this enabled them to significantly reduce customer call times, increase first call resolution metric to over 90%. Customer satisfaction rose to 95%, and they doubled their rate of customer retention, which was a massive change to the previous situation. They also were able to reduce training costs because agents only needed to learn one application. It was much easier to change and grow the staffing levels. They also significantly reduced the back office workload by 50%, because previously those queries would go to the customer, to the back office, instead of being dealt with at the customer interface. So as you can see, two very different examples, both using the same platform and proving the value that data virtualization can provide to an organization. At that point, I'll hand back to you, Jonathan, to begin the Q&A session.
Thank you, Gary, for your part of the presentation. About Q&A, I see it's almost 4 o'clock, so I think it's good to just mention two questions we had before in the session. One is, what does the partnership between Kadenza and Denodo means? How does it work out? Well, I think you can expect from that is that Kadenza can be in the lead, so it can be a business partner, and within the partnership we have all the cooperation with Denodo, with the knowledge and the software to implement the product or to do a proof of concept. So we work together, and you get the business knowledge of Kadenza in that. So the first proof of concept has already taken place. So I think in that way the partnership is very practical and ready to execute. And the second question came in. I think it's good for you to answer, Gary. What's the main value for, what are the investing benefits when choosing for data virtualization?
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I would say the speed, time to market, lower cost of development, reduction in development costs, reduction in storage costs, a whole massive reduction in replication in general. The programs and the projects are much easier and quicker to implement, and therefore you get time to market advantage. You can realize the benefits of the projects that you're carrying out more quickly. You're able to say yes to more projects than you could do in the past, and you're able to realize significant advantages in the market by doing projects that were previously seen as too high cost and too long to deliver. So these are some of the key benefits, and the other thing I would mention specifically in terms of Denodo is the ability to support multiple use cases. So not just agile business intelligence, but also a whole variety of use cases, as you've seen, and deliver a very strong return on your investment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So what can be your next step? How to explore what data virtualization can mean to your business. Like Gary mentioned, it can lower your time to market and lower your total cost of ownership. So please get in touch with Kadenza and Denodo. We can have a talk, we can have a look where data virtualization can fit into your business, or the ability to conduct a proof of concept. And Gary, maybe you can explain what's needed to start a proof of concept, and what are the what time and effort does it take?
Yeah, certainly. So for us and Kadenza as well, the proof of concept is not a project that takes weeks and months. Typically within 1 week, you can do something very tangible. You can establish the software in your own environment against your own data. You can connect to a number of sources. You can build some reusable models on top of the data and consume those through 1 or 2 mechanisms. That whole thing can be achieved. You can take a slice through your requirement and deliver that within usually 1 week of time. And this will give you a very powerful demonstration of what kind of capabilities could mean, these kind of capabilities could mean within your own environment.
All right, thank you. And at last, the Denodo Express, it's free for download, and you can start it this afternoon or tomorrow. You can install and use the product. It's only limited in connectivity, but you can see and execute all the features therein. So it can give you a really good representation about what the tool is and how does it feel and look like. So I think please consider one of these next steps and get in touch with us. After this webinar, we will communicate the topic and the date for the next webinar session we will have, and then we will have a deeper look at data virtualization. And for now, thank you for attending this webinar. And thank you too, Gary.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.